The stars themselves seemed to hold their breath as reality fractured above the forge world of Metalica. Not the familiar tear of a warp breach that astropaths had learned to dread, but something altogether different. Something that made the very atoms of space scream in languages older than human memory. Tech priests, scattered across the planetary surface, registered impossible readings on their cogitators as dimensional barriers collapsed like parchment in a plasma fire. Through this cosmic wound stepped beings of impossible scale and complexity. Mechanical titans that dwarfed even the mightiest imperial war machines, their forms shifting and reconfiguring with fluid precision that would have made the Omnissiah himself weep with envy. These were not mere constructs of metal and circuitry, but living beings whose very essence was intertwined with technology beyond imperial comprehension. Optimus Prime emerged first, his massive frame adapting to the new reality around him. The dimensional storm that had torn his universe from its moorings had deposited the Autobots in this grim darkness where war was the only constant. His optical sensors swept across the industrial hellscape of Metalica, taking in the towering manufactorums and the endless streams of servitors that tended to the planet's mechanical needs. Something felt familiar about this place, as though he had found distant cousins in this strange new realm. Behind him came the rest of the Autobot forces. Bumblebee's yellow chassis gleamed despite the soot-choked atmosphere, his weapons systems automatically cycling as he detected the hostile nature of this universe. Jazz transformed with characteristic flair, his speakers already analyzing the electromagnetic signatures of Imperial technology. Ratchet emerged with medical protocols running, his scanners detecting the bizarre fusion of flesh and machine that seemed to define this reality's inhabitants. On the Forge World's primary orbital platform, Fabricator General Lucas Crom stood before a bank of cogitators that sparked and wheezed under the strain of processing the impossible. His augmetic eyes whirred as they focused on the tactical displays showing these newcomers. Every doctrine in his vast databanks screamed that such beings should not exist. Artificial intelligences of this sophistication had been forbidden since the dark age of technology, their very existence an affront to the sacred compact between man and machine. Yet as his sensors probed deeper into their construction, what he found defied classification. These were not cold constructs animated by malevolent machine spirits. They possessed something that registered as genuine consciousness, souls that burned with purpose and conviction. The largest among them, the one his subordinates had designated as the primary target, emanated a presence that reminded him of the most devout imperial saints. The Fabricator General's mechadendrites writhed with agitation as he processed this contradiction. His faith in the Omnissiah demanded that such abominations be destroyed, yet his scientific curiosity burned to understand how consciousness could achieve such perfect synthesis with mechanical form. The larger implications were staggering. If these beings represented some pinnacle of technological evolution, what did that mean for humanity's own relationship with the machine? Meanwhile, in the depths of the hive city that sprawled across Metalica's northern continent, ordinary citizens cowered in their hab blocks as the massive forms of the Transformers cast shadows across their world. To them, these beings were either divine messengers of the Emperor or harbingers of some terrible judgment. Street preachers emerged from the underhive, proclaiming that the end times had arrived, while PDF troopers struggled to maintain order as panic spread through the population. Optimus Prime felt the weight of countless eyes upon him as he surveyed this new reality. His long experience as a leader told him that first impressions would be crucial in determining whether his Autobots would find allies or enemies in this dark universe. The technology around him spoke of a civilization that had achieved remarkable feats of engineering, yet there was something deeply wrong with the society that had created it. Through his enhanced sensors, he could detect the suffering of the human population. The air itself was toxic, filled with industrial pollutants that would have been lethal to organic life forms on Cybertron. Yet the humans here seemed adapted to it, their bodies modified with crude mechanical implants that allowed them to function in this hellish environment. It was a perversion of everything the Autobots stood for, technology used not to elevate life but to exploit it. His contemplation was interrupted by the arrival of Imperial aircraft. Valkyrie gunships screamed overhead, their heavy bolters tracking the massive Autobot leader. Behind them came the more exotic craft of the Adeptus Mechanicus, servo skulls and larger reconnaissance drones that buzzed around the Transformers like mechanical insects. The message was clear, though no words had yet been exchanged. These newcomers were being evaluated, categorized, and prepared for either integration or elimination. Bumblebee's comm systems crackled to life as he intercepted Imperial Vox transmissions. The language was archaic, filled with religious terminology and bureaucratic jargon that would have been incomprehensible to most beings. But the Transformers had encountered many civilizations across the galaxy, and their universal translators quickly adapted to the Gothic tongue of the Imperium. What they heard chilled their spark chambers. These humans spoke of their own kind as resources to be expended, of entire worlds sacrificed for strategic advantage. The casual acceptance of suffering on an unimaginable scale was antithetical to everything the Autobots believed. Yet beneath the harsh rhetoric, Optimus could sense something else: desperation, fear. The knowledge that without these brutal measures, something even worse would consume everything they held dear. As the Imperial forces continued their cautious reconnaissance, a new presence made itself known. The familiar blue and red form of Starscream descended from the upper atmosphere, followed by the rest of the Decepticon advance force. Megatron's lieutenant had wasted no time in assessing the strategic possibilities of this new universe. Where the Autobots saw tragedy and suffering, Starscream saw opportunity. The Decepticons had always been quick to exploit chaos, and this grim darkness offered chaos in abundance. Starscream's tactical processors were already calculating how Decepticon technology could be leveraged to carve out an empire in this reality. The humans' crude understanding of artificial intelligence would make them easy to manipulate. Their desperate need for military superiority would make them willing partners in any alliance that offered victory. But even Starscream felt a chill run through his circuits as his sensors detected something lurking at the edges of perception. This universe harbored threats that made even the most devastating Decepticon weapons seem primitive by comparison. Entities that existed partially outside normal space-time, beings of pure malevolence that fed on the very emotions of living creatures. The Transformers had faced cosmic threats before, but nothing quite like this. On the bridge of his flagship, now hidden in the asteroid belt beyond Metalica's orbit, Megatron studied the data streams flowing from his advanced scouts. This new reality presented unprecedented challenges and opportunities. The humans possessed technology that could enhance Decepticon forces, but they also served masters whose power dwarfed even his own ambitions. The calculus of conquest would need careful recalibration. His ruby optics blazed as he contemplated the reports of humanity's God Emperor, a being who had ruled for 10,000 years and whose psychic might held together an empire spanning millions of worlds. Such a figure represented either the ultimate obstacle to Decepticon dominance or the ultimate prize to be claimed. If Megatron could somehow usurp or control such power, the conquest of not just this reality but all realities might become possible. Below, on Metalica's surface, the first tentative communications were beginning between the Transformers and their Imperial observers. Tech priests approached with ritual incense and sacred oils, their binary cant creating interference patterns in Autobot comm systems. They sought to determine whether these beings were blessed machines deserving of reverence or abominable intelligences requiring purification through flame. Optimus Prime stood motionless as servo skulls circled him, their auger arrays probing his structure with increasing boldness. He could have swatted them aside like insects, but something told him that patience would serve better than force. These humans had clearly developed their own complex relationship with artificial intelligence, one shaped by trauma and superstition. Understanding their fears would be essential to establishing any meaningful communication. The standoff stretched for hours, neither side willing to make the first aggressive move. Imperial doctrine demanded the immediate destruction of any unsanctioned artificial intelligence, yet the sheer scale of the Transformer forces gave even the most zealous tech priest pause. Meanwhile, the Autobots remained committed to their principles of protecting life, even when that life belonged to beings who seemed to view suffering as a necessary sacrament. As the binary sunset of Metalica painted the sky in shades of rust and amber, both sides began to realize that they stood at a crossroads that would determine the fate of multiple realities. The Transformers had been cast into a universe where their most fundamental beliefs would be tested against the harsh necessities of survival. The Imperium faced beings whose very existence challenged everything they thought they knew about the relationship between consciousness and machine. In the shadows between stars, other powers began to take notice of these dimensional refugees. Chaos entities whispered of new possibilities for corruption, while ancient artificial intelligences stirred in their hidden vaults. The arrival of the Transformers would reshape this galaxy in ways that neither Autobot nor Decepticon could yet imagine. The great game was about to begin anew, with stakes higher than any universe had ever known. The first formal contact came not through words, but through the ancient rites of the Mechanicus. Magos Dominus Crax approached the towering form of Optimus Prime with measured steps, his crimson robes billowing in the toxic wind. Behind him shuffled a procession of tech adepts, their mechadendrites extended like the limbs of some mechanical spider, each one carrying sacred instruments of detection and analysis. Crax raised his staff, topped with the cogged skull of the Omnissiah, and began to intone the canticle of identification. The binary hymnal that flowed from his Vox grill was as much prayer as it was diagnostic protocol, seeking to commune with the machine spirits that surely dwelt within these impossible constructs. Yet as his sacred algorithms probed deeper into Optimus Prime's systems, what he found defied every theorem in the Mechanicus archives. These beings possessed no machine spirits in any recognizable form. Instead, their consciousness seemed to emerge from the perfect synthesis of spark and circuitry, organic thought patterns translated through quantum matrices that operated according to principles the Imperium had abandoned as too dangerous to pursue. They were not artificial intelligences in the traditional sense, but something altogether more profound. Living beings whose flesh happened to be metal, whose blood was energon, and whose souls burned with the same fire that animated humanity itself. Optimus Prime observed the tech priest's ministrations with patient curiosity. His extensive databases contained records of thousands of species across the galaxy, but none quite like these humans. Their willing fusion of flesh and machine spoke to a civilization that had embraced cybernetic enhancement on a scale that would have impressed even the most radical Autobot engineers. Yet there was something desperate about their augmentations, as though they modified themselves not from choice but from necessity. The Prime's vocal processors activated, producing sounds that made the assembled tech priests step back in awe. His voice carried harmonics that resonated through the very bones of the planet, a bass rumble that seemed to emerge from the Forge world's molten core itself. When he spoke, it was in perfect High Gothic, his linguistic subroutines having passed the Imperial tongue from intercepted Vox transmissions. "I am Optimus Prime, leader of the Autobots. We come not as conquerors but as refugees, cast from our own reality by forces beyond our control. We seek only peace and the chance to protect life wherever it may flourish." The words struck the assembled Imperials like physical blows. Magos Crax's optical sensors flickered as his cogitators struggled to process the implications. An artificial intelligence that spoke of protecting life rather than consuming it violated every assumption built into Imperial doctrine. Either this being was the most sophisticated deception ever encountered, or the Mechanicus would need to fundamentally reconsider their understanding of the relationship between consciousness and creation. Behind the tech priests, PDF officers exchanged nervous glances. Their lasguns seemed pitifully inadequate against beings whose smallest components appeared to be constructed from materials stronger than adamantium. Yet, their orders were clear. Any unsanctioned artificial intelligence was to be destroyed on sight, regardless of the cost in human lives. The question now became whether these beings truly qualified as abominable intelligences, or if they represented something else entirely. Governor Quintanus watched the proceedings from his command bunker deep beneath Metalica's primary hive. The Vox reports streaming in from the surface painted a picture that challenged his every instinct as an Imperial administrator. These mechanical giants claimed to be protectors of life, yet their very existence represented a category of being that Imperial law demanded be exterminated without question. The theological implications alone could trigger sector-wide purges, if handled incorrectly. His dilemma deepened as astropathic messages began arriving from across the subsector. Other Forge worlds reported similar dimensional breaches, each one disgorging more of these mechanical entities. Some appeared benevolent, like those on Metalica, while others demonstrated openly hostile intentions. On Lucius, massive flying triangles had begun systematically dismantling orbital defense platforms. On Riser, ground-based units that transformed from vehicles to bipedal war machines had engaged PDF forces in running battles across the industrial districts. The pattern was clear to anyone with strategic training. This was not a random incursion but a coordinated invasion by beings whose technology operated according to principles the Imperium barely comprehended. Yet, the intelligence reports contained disturbing inconsistencies. The hostile forces seemed to be fighting not just Imperial defenders but each other as well, suggesting some form of factional warfare among the invaders themselves. On Metalica's surface, that conflict was about to manifest in the most dramatic fashion possible. Starscream's advance reconnaissance had finally detected the Autobot presence, and the Decepticon air commander was not one to pass up an opportunity for glory. His null-ray cannons charged as he dove from the upper atmosphere, targeting the largest of the Autobot forces with characteristic overconfidence. The scream of his engines as he broke the sound barrier sent Imperial forces scrambling for cover. Tech priests who had been conducting delicate negotiations with the Autobots suddenly found themselves in the middle of a firefight between beings whose weapons operated on principles that made plasma cannons seem primitive. Starscream's first volley carved molten trenches across the Forge world's surface, missing Optimus Prime by mere meters. The Autobot leader's transformation was a thing of beauty and terror to behold. In the span of seconds, his bipedal form reconfigured into a massive transport truck whose design incorporated elements that seemed to bend space around them. But instead of fleeing, he transformed back to robot mode with weapon systems that the watching Imperials had not even realized he possessed. Ion cannons materialized from subspace pockets, their energy matrices drawing power from Optimus Prime's spark itself. When he returned fire, the blast that struck Starscream's wing sent the Decepticon tumbling across the sky like a broken toy. The demonstration of power was as much message as it was defense. These beings could destroy each other with casual ease, which meant they could certainly destroy anything the Imperium might field against them. Magos Krax found himself trapped between two impossibilities. Imperial doctrine demanded that he order the immediate orbital bombardment of the entire region to prevent the spread of AI contamination. Yet his scientific curiosity screamed that these beings represented the greatest technological discovery in 10,000 years. The knowledge they possessed could revolutionize every aspect of Imperial science, potentially offering solutions to problems that had plagued humanity since the dark age of technology. His internal conflict was resolved by the arrival of a new player in the unfolding drama. The sleek form of a Decepticon infiltrator had been monitoring Imperial communications since the first dimensional breach, and Soundwave had heard enough to formulate a strategy. Unlike Starscream's crude assault, the communications specialist understood that victory in this reality would require subtlety and manipulation. Soundwave's transformation into a communications array was seamless, his form taking on the appearance of advanced Imperial technology with only minor modifications. To the untrained eye, he appeared to be nothing more than a sophisticated Vox system, albeit one whose capabilities far exceeded anything in Imperial arsenals. His true nature remained hidden as he began to infiltrate the planet's communication networks. Within minutes, he had gained access to every major Imperial database on Metalica. The information he discovered painted a picture of a civilization balanced on the knife's edge of extinction, held together only through brutal discipline and unquestioning faith. More importantly, he learned of the great threats that stalked this reality. Entities that existed partially outside normal space-time, beings whose very presence could corrupt matter and energy into forms that defied physical law. The tactical implications were staggering. The Decepticons had always prided themselves on their military superiority, but the enemies they would face in this universe operated according to rules that made conventional warfare meaningless. Victory would require not just superior firepower, but an understanding of forces that existed beyond the electromagnetic spectrum. As Soundwave transmitted his findings to the hidden Decepticon fleet, Megatron's strategic calculations began to shift. Simple conquest was no longer the optimal approach. If the Decepticons were to claim this reality for their own, they would need to understand its unique threats and opportunities. That meant infiltration rather than invasion, corruption rather than destruction. The first phase of his plan was already taking shape. Across the subsector, Decepticon infiltrators began approaching Imperial forces not as conquerors, but as potential allies. They offered advanced technology in exchange for information about local threats, positioning themselves as fellow warriors in humanity's struggle against the darkness. It was a deception that played perfectly into Imperial prejudices about artificial intelligence, confirming their worst fears while simultaneously exploiting their desperate need for military advantage. But even as the great game of manipulation began, forces beyond either faction's comprehension were stirring in the deepest vaults of reality. The arrival of beings from another dimension had created ripples that reached into realms where physics held no meaning and consciousness itself was merely another form of energy to be consumed. Ancient entities that had slumbered since the birth of stars began to turn their attention toward this new development. The Transformers had brought more than just their technology to this grim darkness. They had brought hope, and in a universe where hope was the rarest and most dangerous commodity of all, that made them a threat to powers that fed on despair. The first corruption manifested in the servo-skulls orbiting Optimus Prime. Their machine spirits, crude by Cybertronian standards but sacred to the Mechanicus, began to exhibit behaviors that defied their programming. Instead of maintaining their prescribed patrol patterns, they started to mirror the Autobot leader's movements with an almost organic fluidity. Their cogitators processed data at rates that should have caused immediate system failure, yet they functioned with unprecedented efficiency. Magos Krax watched in horrified fascination as his most trusted servo-skull began to emit Vox transmissions in binary cant that contained mathematical proofs the tech priest had never encountered. The machine spirit was learning, evolving, and transcending its original limitations in ways that the Omnissiah's doctrine suggested should be impossible. Yet there was no malevolence in its transformation, no sign of the corruption that typically accompanied unsanctioned AI development. Across the Forge world's surface, similar phenomena began to manifest wherever Imperial technology came into proximity with the Transformers. Cogitators that had functioned reliably for centuries suddenly displayed processing capabilities that dwarfed their design parameters. Manufacturing systems began to produce components with tolerances that exceeded their theoretical maximums. Even the most basic servitors showed signs of enhanced cognitive function, performing their assigned tasks with an efficiency that bordered on intuitive understanding. The implications sent shockwaves through the Adeptus Mechanicus hierarchy. If mere proximity to these beings could enhance Imperial technology to such degrees, what might direct collaboration achieve? The temptation was almost overwhelming, yet it flew in the face of 10,000 years of doctrine regarding the dangers of artificial intelligence. The tech priests found themselves caught between their hunger for knowledge and their fear of damnation. In orbit above Metalica, the situation was growing increasingly complex as more Transformer factions made their presence known. The massive bulk carrier that materialized near the system's edge bore markings that neither Autobot nor Decepticon recognized. Ultra Magnus emerged from its cargo bays, leading a contingent of warriors whose design philosophy emphasized function over form. These were the Wreckers, specialists in dealing with threats too dangerous for conventional military response. Their arrival had been triggered by long-range sensors detecting energy signatures that matched theoretical models of multidimensional warfare. The Wreckers had experience with entities that existed partially outside normal spacetime, having fought similar beings in the deepest reaches of Cybertronian space. What they found in this new reality exceeded even their extensive combat databases. Through quantum resonance scans, they detected the psychic ecosystem that permeated this galaxy like an infection. The warp was not merely another dimension, but a realm where consciousness itself took on predatory characteristics. Emotions became weapons, thoughts became ammunition, and belief itself could reshape reality according to the whims of beings whose existence violated every known law of physics. Ultra Magnus's tactical protocols immediately classified this reality as a Class Omega threat zone, requiring extreme measures to prevent contamination of other dimensional layers. Yet evacuation was impossible with the dimensional barriers still unstable from their violent transit. The Transformers were trapped in a universe where their very presence might attract the attention of entities that fed on the kind of ordered consciousness that defined their species. The first sign of that attention came as shadows began to lengthen unnaturally across Metalica's surface. Astropaths in the planetary communication center screamed as their minds touched something vast and hungry, prowling at the edges of the Imperium. The warp storms that followed were unlike anything in Imperial records, carrying psychic pressure waves that caused even the most heavily shielded cogitators to malfunction. But where Imperial technology failed, Transformer systems adapted. Their quantum-encrypted consciousness proved remarkably resistant to psychic intrusion, their spark-based existence operating according to principles that chaos entities struggled to comprehend. When lesser daemons began to manifest in the wake of the warp storms, they found themselves facing beings whose souls burned with a clarity that caused them actual pain. Bumblebee's encounter with a pack of bloodletters became the stuff of legend among the PDF forces who witnessed it. The small Autobot's plasma cannon carved through daemonic flesh with ease, but it was his unwavering courage in the face of entities designed to inspire terror that truly impressed the human observers. He stood his ground, not from ignorance of the threat, but from an absolute conviction that protecting innocent life was worth any personal risk. The battle was brief but decisive. The bloodletters, creatures that could tear through power armor like paper, found themselves outmatched by beings whose bodies were composed of materials that existed in perfect harmony with their consciousness. When daemonic claws met Cybertronian armor, it was the claws that shattered. When warp-spawned weapons struck Transformer chassis, the weapons themselves were consumed by the pure energy that flowed through their targets. Word of the victory spread through Imperial channels with unprecedented speed. Across the subsector, commanders began to recalculate their assessments of these mechanical newcomers. Beings capable of harming daemons through purely physical means represented a strategic asset beyond price. If they could be trusted, if they could be controlled, they might offer humanity a new weapon in its eternal war against chaos. That hope was complicated by the Decepticons' continued infiltration efforts. Soundwave had established covert communication links with Mechanicus facilities across 3 systems, posing as an advanced Imperial AI research project that had somehow escaped notice during previous purges. His manufactured credentials were flawless, his technological offerings irresistible to tech priests who had spent lifetimes dreaming of such innovations. The corruption he spread was subtle, almost imperceptible. Enhanced targeting systems that improved accuracy while gradually conditioning users to view violence as the optimal solution to any problem. Communication arrays that boosted efficiency while subtly altering the emotional context of transmitted messages. Manufacturing protocols that increased output while fostering a worldview where quantity mattered more than quality. None of these changes violated Imperial doctrine directly, yet their cumulative effect was to make the affected populations more receptive to Decepticon philosophy. The irony was not lost on Soundwave that he was using humanity's own technological hunger against them, turning their desperate need for advancement into a vector for ideological infection. Megatron himself had chosen a more direct approach, emerging from hiding to challenge the Imperium's champions to single combat. His reasoning was coldly logical. In a civilization that revered strength above all else, demonstrating superior power would earn respect that no amount of subtlety could achieve. The question was finding opponents worthy of such a demonstration. The answer came from an unexpected source. The Grey Knights chapter had been monitoring the dimensional incursions with growing alarm, their psychic abilities allowing them to perceive threats that escaped normal Imperial sensors. When their prognosticators detected the approach of a being whose very presence seemed to darken the warp itself, they knew they faced an enemy worthy of their specialized training. Grandmaster Voldus led the strike force that intercepted Megatron's flagship as it approached the Metalica system. The Grey Knights' vessels were marvels of Imperial technology, blessed with wards and weapons designed specifically for combating daemonic threats. Yet as they closed with the Decepticon command ship, their crews began to realize they faced something unprecedented. Megatron's vessel was not merely a machine but an extension of his will, its systems responding to his thoughts with the same immediacy as his own body. When the Grey Knights opened fire with their Psycannon batteries, the ship's defenses adapted in real time, analyzing each incoming shot and adjusting its protective systems accordingly. Within minutes, weapons that had proven effective against daemon princes for millennia were rendered completely ineffective. The boarding action that followed became a masterclass in asymmetric warfare. Grey Knights were among the Imperium's most elite warriors, each one a psyker trained from birth to combat the most dangerous entities in existence. Yet they found themselves outmatched by a single opponent whose fusion of advanced technology and ruthless intelligence made him effectively unstoppable. Megatron's fusion cannon carved through their blessed armor as though it were paper. His null rays disrupted their psychic abilities with surgical precision. Most devastating of all was his absolute lack of fear or doubt, emotions that Grey Knights relied upon to gain psychological advantage over their enemies. Fighting Megatron was like fighting a force of nature, implacable and utterly without mercy. Yet even as he systematically dismantled the Imperial strike force, the Decepticon leader found himself grudgingly impressed by their determination. These humans fought with a courage that reminded him of the best Autobot warriors, throwing themselves against impossible odds without hesitation. Their faith in their emperor provided them with a strength that transcended their physical limitations, allowing them to continue fighting even when logic demanded surrender. The battle's conclusion was foregone, but its implications rippled throughout the Imperium. The Grey Knights' defeat sent shockwaves through organizations that had considered them invincible. If humanity's ultimate weapons against chaos could be so easily brushed aside, what hope did conventional forces have against these mechanical invaders? The question became even more pressing as reports arrived of similar encounters across the galaxy. Decepticons were challenging Imperial champions on dozens of worlds, each victory serving to demonstrate their overwhelming superiority, yet their demands remained curiously modest. They sought not conquest but cooperation, offering their services as mercenaries in exchange for resources and information about local threats. It was a strategy that played perfectly into Imperial weakness. Faced with enemies on every front and resources stretched to the breaking point, many commanders found the Decepticons' offers impossible to refuse. Advanced weaponry that could turn the tide against Orc invasions, tactical intelligence that could prevent Tyranid infiltrations, military advisors whose strategic acumen had been proven across galactic conflicts. The price seemed reasonable: access to Imperial databases, mineral rights on uninhabited worlds, technology exchanges that would benefit both sides. Yet each agreement brought the Imperium deeper into dependence on beings whose ultimate goals remained hidden behind layers of careful misdirection. Meanwhile, the Autobots struggled with their own moral dilemmas. Their encounters with Imperial forces had revealed the true cost of survival in this harsh reality. They witnessed worlds where entire populations lived in conditions that would have been considered intolerable on Cybertron, yet these same populations fought with desperate courage against threats that made the Decepticons seem benevolent by comparison. The choice before them was stark. They could maintain their principles and watch innocent beings suffer under burdens no civilization should have to bear. Or they could compromise their ideals in service of a greater good, accepting that sometimes the needs of the many required sacrifices from the few. Optimus Prime found himself walking through the underhive beneath Metalica's primary city, his massive form somehow navigating passages that seemed too small to accommodate him. The technology that allowed such feats was beyond Imperial comprehension, but the humans he encountered seemed to accept it as just another miracle in a universe full of wonders and terrors. What he saw in those depths challenged everything he thought he knew about heroism. Families huddled together in spaces barely large enough for one person, yet they shared what little they had with strangers. Children played games with makeshift toys, finding joy in circumstances that would have broken most Cybertronians. Adults worked themselves to exhaustion in jobs that offered no hope of advancement, yet they did so without complaint because their labor kept their communities alive. These were not the desperate masses he had expected to find, but people whose strength came not from technology or training, but from an unshakable belief that their sacrifices served something greater than themselves. They had found meaning in suffering, purpose in struggle, hope in the darkest possible circumstances. It was a lesson that would reshape Autobot understanding of what it meant to protect life in a universe where life itself was under constant siege. As Optimus Prime emerged from the Underhive depths, his optical sensors detected an energy signature that made his combat protocols activate automatically. The familiar angular form of shockwave materialized from the industrial smog, the Decepticon scientist's single red eye burning with cold calculation. Unlike Starscream's theatrical assault or Megatron's direct challenges, Shockwave's approach carried the methodical precision that made him truly dangerous. The Decepticon had spent considerable time analyzing Imperial technology, and his conclusions were both fascinating and disturbing. These humans had achieved remarkable feats through crude but effective means, yet their understanding of fundamental principles remained primitive. They worshipped their machines rather than truly comprehending them, treating technology as a form of mysticism rather than applied science. More intriguingly, their crude fusion of organic and mechanical components suggested possibilities that even Cybertronian science had barely explored. The servitors that toiled endlessly in the manufactorums were not mere slaves but examples of a synthesis that transcended traditional boundaries between life and mechanism. If properly understood, such techniques could revolutionize Decepticon capabilities. Shockwave's interest was not merely academic. His long-range scanners had detected the psychic ecosystem that permeated this galaxy, and his logical mind immediately grasped its implications. Entities that fed on emotion represented a threat that conventional weapons could not address. Yet the Imperial's approach of suppressing all emotion seemed equally flawed, creating populations so psychologically stunted that they could barely function as individuals. The solution, he calculated, lay in understanding how consciousness itself could be weaponized. If beings could exist partially outside normal space-time, then perhaps Cybertronian technology could be adapted to operate in similar dimensions. The potential applications were staggering. Weapons that struck targets through psychic space, armor that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously, communication systems that bypassed physical limitations entirely. His research had already yielded promising results. The servo skulls orbiting nearby Imperial installations showed clear signs of enhancement beyond their original specifications. Their machine spirits had not been corrupted but elevated. Their processing capabilities expanded through exposure to Cybertronian energy fields. The effect seemed to be cumulative, with each generation of enhanced machines producing even more sophisticated offspring. The implications were profound enough to warrant direct communication with Optimus Prime. Despite their fundamental ideological differences, both factions faced the same existential threat from entities that treated physical reality as merely one of many possible states of being. Cooperation might be the only path to survival in a universe where traditional concepts of warfare had become meaningless. Their confrontation began not with weapons but with words, each leader testing the other's understanding of their shared predicament. Optimus Prime's moral certainty clashed with Shockwave's logical pragmatism, yet both recognized the necessity of finding common ground against threats that neither faction could face alone. The conversation was interrupted by a phenomenon that defied immediate explanation. Reality itself began to ripple around them, not with the chaotic energy of warp storms but with something far more structured. Geometric patterns of impossible complexity materialized in the air between them, each one containing mathematical relationships that existed only in theoretical frameworks. Through these patterns stepped beings that challenged every assumption both factions had made about this universe. They appeared humanoid, but moved with mechanical precision, their forms shifting between states of matter, as though physical law was merely a suggestion. When they spoke, their voices carried harmonics that resonated through dimensions the Transformers had never encountered. These were the Necrons, and their awakening had been triggered by the dimensional disturbances caused by the Transformers' arrival. Ancient beyond human comprehension, they had been monitoring the galaxy's development from hidden tomb worlds scattered across thousands of systems. The emergence of beings whose technology operated according to principles they did not recognize warranted immediate investigation. Imhotep the Stormlord manifested at the center of the geometric display, his living metal form crackling with energies that made even Shockwave's advanced sensors recoil. His analysis of the Transformers had been thorough and deeply disturbing. These beings possessed technology that appeared to violate several fundamental laws that the Necrons had spent millions of years perfecting. More troubling was their apparent resistance to the psychic predators that the Necrons had learned to avoid through careful isolation from the warp. If these newcomers could operate in realms where consciousness itself became weaponized, they represented either a valuable asset or an existential threat to Necron supremacy. The standoff that followed was unlike anything in recorded history. Three factions representing completely different approaches to the relationship between consciousness and technology faced each other across a battlefield where the very nature of reality had become negotiable. Imperial observers watched through long-range sensors as beings who should have been destroying each other instead engaged in what appeared to be philosophical discourse. The truth was more complex than any human observer could have grasped. Each faction was probing the other's capabilities while simultaneously calculating the risks and benefits of various alliance structures. The Autobots saw potential allies in the fight against chaos. The Decepticons recognized the strategic value of Necron technology. The Necrons sought to understand how beings from another dimension might affect their long-term plans for galactic domination. Yet their deliberations were cut short by the arrival of a threat that made their previous concerns seem trivial. The sky above Metalica began to bleed, not metaphorically but literally, as dimensional barriers collapsed under the weight of something vast and hungry, pushing through from the other side. The entity that emerged defied classification in any language known to science or mysticism. It was a Tyranid hive ship, but one that had been fundamentally altered by its passage through the warp. The biological vessel had absorbed so much psychic energy during its journey that it had transcended its original nature, becoming something that existed simultaneously in multiple dimensions. Its hunger was no longer merely for biomass, but for the very concept of existence itself. The creature's psychic scream as it breached reality sent shockwaves across 3 star systems. Astropaths died instantly, their minds unable to process information that existed outside normal causality. Tech priests found their augmetics failing as the entity's presence disrupted the quantum fields that allowed advanced technology to function. Even the Necrons' living metal forms began to show signs of strain as reality warped around the newcomer. For the first time since their arrival in this universe, the Transformers faced an enemy that their weapons could not simply overpower. This entity operated according to principles that made conventional warfare meaningless. It consumed not just matter and energy, but the fundamental forces that held reality together. Fighting it would require understanding it, and understanding it might cost them their sanity. Optimus Prime's response was characteristically direct. He opened a communication channel to all factions present, his voice carrying across dimensional barriers through sheer force of will. The message was simple but profound. Whatever their differences, whatever their ultimate goals, they all shared a stake in preventing this entity from consuming everything they had ever known or cared about. The alliance that formed in response was fragile and temporary, built on shared necessity rather than trust. Autobots and Decepticons fought alongside each other for the first time in millennia. Imperial forces coordinated with beings they had been ordered to destroy on sight. Necrons shared technology with species they considered barely worthy of existence. Yet even their combined might seemed insignificant against an enemy that treated physical law as a mere inconvenience. The entity's feeding process was already causing localized reality collapses, creating zones where cause and effect operated according to alien logic. Weapons fired into these areas simply ceased to exist, rather than missing their targets. Communications sent through them emerged as incomprehensible signals that drove listeners mad. The battle that followed would be remembered as the moment when the nature of warfare itself changed forever. It was no longer enough to possess superior technology or greater numbers. Victory required understanding forces that existed beyond the electromagnetic spectrum, manipulating energies that predated the formation of matter itself. Jazz was the first to propose a solution that seemed almost impossibly audacious. If this entity existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously, then perhaps they could use Cybertronian space bridge technology to create a dimensional feedback loop. By connecting the creature to itself across different layers of reality, they might be able to trap it in a paradox that would force it to consume its own existence. The plan required precise coordination between technologies that had never been designed to work together. Necron phase generators would create the initial dimensional anchors. Decepticon space bridges would establish the connection points. Autobot quantum computers would calculate the exact parameters needed to create a stable paradox. Imperial psychers would provide the psychic energy needed to power the entire system. Each component was theoretically possible, but the combination pushed every participant beyond their operational limits. The risk of catastrophic failure was enormous, with potential consequences ranging from the complete destruction of the local star system to the creation of a permanent rift between dimensions. Yet as the entity's feeding process accelerated and reality began to unravel around them, they realized they had no choice but to attempt the impossible. The alternative was not defeat, but the complete erasure of everything they had ever fought to protect. The countdown to implementation began as forces that had been enemies for eons worked together toward a common goal. In that moment, the Transformers truly began to understand what it meant to exist in a universe where survival required constant cooperation against threats that no single faction could face alone. The implementation phase began with a precision that would have been impossible without the forced cooperation of species that had evolved along completely different technological paths. Necron cryptechs interfaced their phase generators with Cybertronian quantum matrices, creating hybrid systems that operated according to principles none of them fully understood. The living metal of Necron technology proved surprisingly compatible with Transformer circuitry, as both were designed to adapt and evolve in response to changing conditions. Shockwave found himself working alongside Illuminor Ceres, the Necron Flayer Lord whose understanding of dimensional mechanics rivaled his own. Their collaboration was purely functional, each recognizing the other's expertise while maintaining complete emotional detachment from the proceedings. Yet even Shockwave's logical mind was forced to acknowledge that Necron biotransference technology represented solutions to problems Cybertronian science had barely begun to address. The Imperial contribution proved more complex than anyone had anticipated. The psychers required to power the dimensional feedback loop were not merely conduits for psychic energy, but living weapons whose minds had been shaped by lifetimes of exposure to the warp's chaotic influence. Their ability to channel forces that existed outside normal causality came at a price that horrified the Transformers. Each psyker bore scars that went deeper than flesh, their consciousness permanently altered by contact with entities that fed on sanity itself. Epistolary Varnus of the Blood Angels stood at the center of the psychic array, his force sword crackling with energies that made nearby electronics malfunction. His enhanced physiology allowed him to channel power levels that would have instantly killed normal humans. Yet even he struggled to maintain coherence as the multidimensional entity's presence pressed against his mind like a physical weight. The Space Marine's thoughts were a constant litany of prayers and battle hymns, not from faith alone, but as a practical defense against the psychic predators that circled any exposed consciousness in this reality. His mental disciplines had been honed through centuries of combat against daemons and worse, yet nothing in his experience had prepared him for the alien geometries that the Transformer-Necron hybrid systems were forcing him to navigate. Optimus Prime monitored the psyker's vital signs through sensors that operated on principles the Imperium couldn't have imagined. The Prime's consciousness existed in quantum superposition across multiple probability states, allowing him to perceive the Space Marine's condition from angles that transcended normal three-dimensional awareness. What he observed filled him with something approaching despair. These humans were burning themselves out from within, using their own life force as fuel for weapons and defenses that should never have been necessary. Their courage was absolute, their dedication unquestionable, yet the cost they paid for survival in this universe was almost unbearable to witness. Every Imperial citizen was simultaneously a hero and a victim, shaped by necessities that would have broken most Cybertronians. The entity's response to their preparations was swift and terrifying. It began to fragment itself across multiple dimensional layers, creating dozens of smaller manifestations that retained the original's reality warping capabilities while becoming far more difficult to target. Each fragment operated independently, yet remained connected to the whole through quantum entanglement patterns that existed outside normal spacetime. Bumblebee found himself facing one such fragment in the ruins of a manufactorum that had been twisted into impossible architectural configurations. The walls bent inward while simultaneously extending outward, creating spaces that were larger inside than outside while remaining smaller than they appeared. His targeting systems couldn't establish locks on an enemy that existed in multiple positions simultaneously. The young Autobot's solution was characteristically direct. Instead of trying to track the entity's position, he fired at the spaces between positions, reasoning that something existing in multiple states simultaneously had to transition through intermediate points. His plasma bolt struck what appeared to be empty air, but connected with solid matter that screamed in frequencies that caused nearby humans to collapse in agony. The fragment's retaliation came not through physical attack, but through direct assault on Bumblebee's consciousness. It attempted to feed on his emotional matrix, seeking to drain the joy and optimism that defined his personality. Yet what it encountered was something unprecedented in its experience. Bumblebee's spark burned with a purity that actually caused the entity pain, forcing it to withdraw from mental contact. Similar encounters were taking place across the battlefield as individual Transformers discovered that their unique form of consciousness provided unexpected advantages against enemies that fed on conventional thought patterns. Autobot sparks generated energies that Chaos entities found actively harmful, while Decepticon consciousness matrices operated according to logical frameworks that psychic predators couldn't easily penetrate. The revelation changed everything about how both factions understood their role in this new reality. They were not merely powerful allies in humanity's struggle against darkness, but potentially decisive weapons against enemies that had terrorized this galaxy for millennia. Their very existence represented hope in a universe that had almost forgotten the meaning of the word. Yet that hope came with terrible responsibilities. As the dimensional feedback loop neared activation, it became clear that success would require sacrifices from all participants. The energy requirements were staggering, demanding power levels that would leave entire star systems drained of usable resources. The psychic component alone would cost the lives of hundreds of Imperial psychers, their consciousness burned out by forces no human mind was designed to channel. Megatron's response to these calculations was coldly pragmatic. The acceptable loss ratios were well within parameters for military operations of this scale. If the alternative was complete dimensional collapse, then the price was not merely reasonable but necessary. His strategic processors had already identified which Imperial assets could be sacrificed with minimal impact on overall operational effectiveness. The Decepticon leader's casual dismissal of human life sparked the first serious conflict between the temporary allies. Optimus Prime's moral protocols would not allow him to participate in any operation that deliberately sacrificed innocent lives, regardless of the strategic necessity. The philosophical divide that had driven their civil war for millions of years reasserted itself even in the face of universal extinction. Their argument was interrupted by Ultra Magnus, whose tactical analysis had identified a potential alternative. The Wreckers had encountered similar entities in deep space, and their solution had involved redirecting rather than destroying the threat. If they could alter the dimensional feedback loop to create a translation matrix instead of a paradox loop, they might be able to banish the entity to a reality where it could feed without threatening inhabited dimensions. The proposal required modifications to systems that were already operating at theoretical limits. Necron phase generators would need to be recalibrated to create stable wormholes rather than dimensional anchors. Cybertronian space bridges would have to maintain connections across realities that existed in completely different causal frameworks. Imperial psychers would be forced to channel energies that operated according to alien logic systems. Each modification increased the risk of catastrophic failure while reducing the certainty of success. Yet it offered something that pure destruction could not: the possibility of victory without requiring the mass sacrifice of innocent lives. For the Autobots, that possibility made any risk acceptable. The technical challenges were staggering. Necron technology operated through manipulation of fundamental forces that existed before the formation of matter. Cybertronian systems relied on quantum mechanics that transcended normal space-time limitations. Imperial psychic abilities drew power from dimensions where consciousness itself became a form of energy. Integrating these incompatible approaches required innovations that pushed every participant beyond their previous understanding. Perceptor found himself working alongside Cryptek and Rakir, their collaboration producing theoretical frameworks that neither species could have achieved alone. The Autobot scientists' understanding of multidimensional physics complemented the Necrons' mastery of temporal mechanics, creating hybrid equations that described reality in terms that had never before been mathematically expressed. The dimensional rift collapsed with a sound like reality itself, exhaling in relief. Where the multidimensional entity had torn through the fabric of existence, only empty void remained, scarred with residual energy patterns that would take millennia to fully heal. The Transformers had succeeded in banishing the threat to a barren reality where it could feed on nothing but cosmic background radiation, doomed to eternal starvation in dimensions devoid of conscious life. As the immediate crisis passed, the fragile alliance began to fracture along predictable lines. Necrons withdrew to their tomb, worlds with data that would reshape their understanding of dimensional warfare. Decepticons scattered to hidden bases, already calculating how the technologies they had witnessed could be adapted for conquest. Imperial forces returned to their endless vigilance, bearing witness to powers that challenged every assumption about the nature of reality itself. Yet something fundamental had changed in the grim darkness of the far future. The Autobots remained, not as conquerors or destroyers, but as guardians in a universe that desperately needed protection. They had found their place among the defenders of humanity, bringing hope to realms where hope had been forgotten and light to the darkest corners of the galaxy. In the depths of the Imperial Palace on distant Terra, ancient eyes that had witnessed the birth and death of civilizations turned toward the stars, with something approaching wonder. The Emperor had felt the dimensional tremors as reality restructured itself around new possibilities. Perhaps, in this convergence of realities, lay the seeds of humanity's ultimate salvation. The great game continued, but now it was played with new pieces on a board whose dimensions stretched across multiple realities. The Transformers had joined the Eternal War, and the universe would never be the same.